Business model design. Designing a business model is essential part of entrepreneurial thinking process. We design business model after we have fully understood the problems of our customers that we are planning to address, and after we have developed the initial innovative solution that addresses that problem. Once the solution is developed, we have to wrap around this solution a viable business model. So business model is a commercial manifestation of an innovation. Without a business model, a great innovation will not see the light of the day because it will not be able to solve the customer's problem in a sustainable manner. Of course, business model can be a business model of, for example, social enterprise or a non-profit, where maximizing profit is not the key purpose. Yet business model is still, it explains how the things are done in our company. It explains how exactly we are reaching our customers, how exactly we are delivering on the promises of our value proposition. It is the business model that ultimately determines our financial result, whether it is profit or loss, or whether it is positive financial result for a non-profit or not. So business model design. First, let's talk in general about the phenomenon of business models, what it is all about. Let's imagine the situation that two software developers meet in the hallway of a university and decide to start a company. And their company is going to develop applications for tablets. So both software developers, they know really well how to develop applications for tablets or for smartphones, and they actually want to create a company about it. Now the question is, how can they monetize their competence? How can they monetize those innovations that will emerge out of their R&D process? Well, there are different ways their potential firm can make money. First and foremost, most obvious, they can try to sell the applications. This is how it was done 10 years ago or 5 years ago, when a customer, when they wanted to have an application, they would just pay through iTunes or Google Play Store. They would pay money for the application. Fortunately or unfortunately, right now the customers are spoiled, and they are spoiled with free applications, and they really want to get it for free, and you have to find other ways to monetize your business model. Well, you can, for example, sell subscriptions. If your product or your service requires constant updates and gives customers, for example, new content, you can actually charge subscription fees. So customers get application for free, but later they have to pay you $5 for updating the content. So this is how most of the e-media are organized these days. Also, if you're a parent, you probably already know the idea of in-app purchases. When my kids are playing on their phones, or on my phone for that matter, and from time to time they ask me to enter the password in order to buy an additional weapon for their online game. Offering in-app purchases is another viable business model for the ventures that we discussed. Sometimes, if you expect to have hundreds of millions of users, you can make money, you can monetize your venturing idea through showing ads, commercials or commercial videos, or some other banner ads, for example. Sometimes you can develop a donation-based business model when, for example, this is how I file my taxes in Canada. I use one online tool that allows me to file my taxes. At the end, they show me, like, your refund this year is going to be like that. Would you like to support our activity? And I gladly support them. And this actually, they have been doing it for a while, so for about a decade. So apparently this business model is quite viable. You can offer free online, paid offline version of your product. This is a lot of dictionaries, how a lot of dictionaries are organized. So you can use Merriam-Webster dictionary for free if you have internet connection, but if you want to make sure that Merriam-Webster dictionary works on your smartphone when there is no internet around, you have to get paid offline version. And there are lots of other ways to make money. So I listed only 6. It is a laundry list, but probably, if we keep on brainstorming, we can get this list to a dozen easily. All of these are essentially different business models. So the problem that the company is solving is the same. Solution is the same. They develop the applications for tablets. Problem is that it's like solving some customer's problem through this application. But ways to monetize are totally different. Okay, we talked about high tech, but let's get back to low tech. Let's get back to what about more mundane, more traditional industries like residential real estate brokerage. Can we talk about different business models of residential real estate brokers? Well, actually, yes. The traditional real estate brokerage model is a boutique type approach to each customer when a broker makes 2 or 3 deals a month, and this generates sufficient amount, huge actually, flow of revenues for the brokerage office. So traditional business model is all about value added strategy, low volumes, 1 or 2 deals a month is okay. Single revenue stream is brokerage fee. So real estate broker gets money only once the transaction actually is finalized. And boutique approach to each deal. If a broker is helping a seller, then they must make sure that the house is prepared for selling, that house is available on all database, the house is available for viewing for potential buyers. So it is boutique approach. Broker has to spend a lot of money with the seller. The same with buyer. The broker will have to drive buyers around the town and show them different houses, arrange views of the houses up until the deal is finalized. But 1 or 2 deals a month is okay. Key resource is exclusive access to MLS, multiple listing service, so exclusive access to unique database of all property that is on sale in a particular neighborhood or in a particular municipality. Plus, brokers are expected to have local social embeddedness. They should understand where the next subway train line is going to be, which neighborhoods are on the rise, which neighborhoods are maybe decaying. All of these things you expect from your broker. So that's traditional business model. However, simultaneously with traditional real estate brokerage models, we can talk about lots of alternatives that are emerging recently in the same industry and that are successfully coexisting in the same real estate brokerage industry. For example, first and foremost, we can talk about discounted real estate brokerage offices, where instead of charging you on average 5%, they will charge you 1%, but will offer much fewer services. We can talk about now totally different things. Aggregator websites like Zillow.com in the United States, Imonet.da in Germany, and so they are popping up around the world. Aggregator websites are aggregating all the information from Craigslist, from Zillow, from Kijiji, from multiple listing services, and if a person wants to know what is the price of houses in a particular neighborhood, they can always see that neighborhood with all the houses that are currently on sale. Up to a level that in the United States I used Zillow.com a lot. So if I would need to go to my fellow professor's home for a dinner, as a conversation starter, I would go to Zillow.com and see how much they paid for their house, and instead of discussing the weather, we would discuss, I saw that you bought the house for 500k, now it is 550, so how do you like it? So it was a really great conversation starter. Also, in some countries, there are auction websites that allow you to sell your property quite fast. Of course, if you list your house traditionally through real estate broker and can wait half a year, you might get a little bit better price. But if you need money quite fast, auction website can actually give you a decent sum. Finally, we have more and more cash offer websites and cash offer web systems where you simply enter information about your house and they give you cash offer on the spot. Of course, then somebody will still come and take a look at your house, but ultimately you can get money almost immediately. What's important, if we think about traditional real estate brokerage versus cash offer website, that's totally different business model. Traditional real estate brokerage is essentially a boutique consulting type of business model, while cash offer website is very much investment intensive. sophisticated system that has to very precisely estimate the price of a property in order to make a cash offer, and then that has to have a lot of access to capital in order to purchase that property and then to keep it for a few months or to sell it. So that's totally different business models coexisting in the same industry and solving essentially the same problem, facilitating the transactions between buyers and sellers in real estate market. So, what is a business model? A little bit nerdy definition is: business model is a cluster of routines for creating economic value for the firm's stakeholders and capturing part of this value for the firm itself and its shareholders. Let's just think. Business model is a buzzword, and it is really important. Most people use it without understanding what it is. It's really important to actually understand what business model is before proceeding. So first and foremost, business model is a cluster of routines. It means that business model is a routinized activity within an organization. It is like a cycle, recurring cycle that happens again and again. If you don't have the established recurring cycle in your company, you don't have a business model yet. If you have a project-based organization that does projects for everyone, you don't have an established business model yet. So business model, we can talk about business model only if we have recurring cycle of activities or cluster of routines, routinized activities. That's the difference between essentially a startup and an established company. Startup is still trying to routinize something that might work, while established company already has this routinized cluster of routines. Now, what does business model do? First, create economic value for stakeholders. It means that business model has to solve essential problems for your customers and for the rest of constituents that are important for your company to operate. So business model has to create economic value for stakeholders. It is all about fulfilling, generating meaningful value proposition to all important stakeholders and delivering on this promise. Also, business model finally has to make sure that the whole thing is profitable. So appropriating or capturing part of this value for the firm and shareholders simply means that at the end of the day there is positive financial result. Again, you can talk about social enterprise, or we can talk about business model of a non-profit where the result might be negative. But in this case, essential part of the business model will be also finding a routine for consistently supporting your activities. Because essentially non-profit's business model that always has negative financial result, it means that you have to, in order to have a sustainable existence for years to come, you have to find sustainable source that will compensate for this negative financial result. So, a business model is different from business strategy. Essentially, business strategy, what is business strategy? Business strategy is a general idea about how your company is going to compete and how your company is going to create and protect competitive advantage. Strategy does not create value. Strategy sets the limit for possible profitability. So if you're operating in a bad industry, if you don't have competitive advantage, it means that you have issues with strategy. Most likely no profit will be materialized, or even in medium term your company will go out of business. But if you selected the proper niche where you can become a monopolist, if you have good ways for creating and sustaining your competitive advantage, it is all about strategy. But again, strategy is just is vision and mission and the plan for maintaining this competitive advantage. Strategy in itself does not put money in the pocket of the owners of your company. Strategy itself does not create value for your customers. It is the business model which is about everyday operations, routinized everyday operations where value is created and profit is captured. Business model is also different from business processes and technology. Business model is above. It also has commercial aspects, not just technological aspects. And finally, business model is definitely not marketing mix. Rather, marketing mix is part of the business model, part of our go-to-market dimension of a business model. Business model occupies the central role in commercial enterprise. Of course, we start from strategy. It is about industry and how to secure competitive advantage. But again, strategy is general direction. It does not create value in itself. It is the business model where rubber hits the road and strategy gets implemented through routinized activities. So business model is all about value creation, value appropriation, but the term routine has to be here. Only once you have recurring pattern of activities for value creation and value capture that we can talk about business model. And finally, it is the business model that will determine the organization of operations, sales, R&D, production, supply chain, service. All your operations will be part of your business model. It is the business model that has to dictate organizational structure. Things like decision-making authority, incentive systems, all of these things have to be have to support your business model. And finally, your financial plans, like projected financial results and actual results, will be determined by business model. So business model is at the center of any commercial enterprise. Business model is all about how firm strategy gets translated to operation structure and financial results. Attention to business models. Now it's important. The term business model is actually not that old. Up until 1996, 1997, not too many people talked about business model. So Google Ngram Viewer is a really great tool, and I'm using the chart from it. So Google Ngram Viewer shows us what is the percentage of all books published in a particular year that have a particular term. So if you enter there, for example, capitalism, you will have 0 all the way up until Karl Marx published his Capital, where he actually coined the term capitalism. And then after Karl Marx, the word capitalism starts taking traction. The same with business models. Of course, it is not capitalism, not as fundamental, but still it is something very important. So all the way up until 1996, 1997, business model was not mentioned too often. And then something happened. Something happened and business models started getting discussed more and more frequently in all books that were published in those years. And why 1997, 98, 2000? Well, the answer is simple. This was the rise of internet commerce. This was the rise of internet business models. At that time, there was a lot of wishful thinking about the new economy that opens new markets, allows major innovations in value propositions, scalable global business models. So it is with the rise of internet economy that the term business model became important, because if you have hundreds of millions of users, sooner or later you will have to, in addition to creating value to those users, you will have to think about how to appropriate it, how to monetize it. And that's where business model helps you. What's interesting also, around the same time the term e-commerce started gaining momentum. But after the year of 2004, essentially the interest, so the new books that talk about e-commerce, their number starts going down, while the number of books about business models remain on the rise. Simply because my explanation is that e-commerce is not that different. It fits really well into our traditional marketing models. It adds something, but essential 4 P's of marketing, they still remain the same, even though one of the channels become electronic channel. While business model is still different. Business model is not just about marketing mix. Business model is about organization of all your activities. It is about how exactly you are going to implement your competitive advantage. And with business models, we still have a lot of unanswered questions. Let me get back to this idea of the new economy, about which we had a lot of discussions around the year up to the year of 2000. So at that time, in popular business press and even in academic literature, we saw a lot of discussions about new economy of internet, where value creation for customers is the thing, the primary thing. All you have to do is have happy customers. Appropriation part, which means generating profit, will come later. The mantra was, if you have 100 million customers, you will find a way to monetize what you're doing. User base is considered the main asset, and we need new metrics for business efficiency. This was the dominant discourse in popular business press up until the year of 2000. At that time, NASDAQ was on the rise, everything was great, and then it totally collapsed. This was the well-known dot-com bubble of 2000. This was the dot-com bubble where investors almost overnight lost confidence in internet companies without viable business models that promised way to create profit in the long term. So this is a cautionary tale. This is a cautionary tale because right now I feel that we are experiencing a similar bubble. We are experiencing again the rise of discussions of the new economy where profitability is not considered the key thing. It is value creation for the customer that is considered the key thing. We see the rise of NASDAQ right now. And probably one of the cautionary tales, in order to show my point, is this application. Application was called Yo. Application was valued, so the company was valued at $10 million when it was raising money. But what Yo was doing? Yo was written almost over one evening by software developers. Yo could allow you to maintain the list of your contacts and send them the only phrase, which was Yo. And that's it. No way to show ads, no other way to monetize. It was just sending Yo to your contacts. And this company was evaluated at $10 million, which basically means that we are already right now experiencing or moving to the next bubble where investors, particularly in places like Silicon Valley, are getting much more interested in the number of users you have rather than in the amount of profit that you generate. Well, okay, high-tech startups, they will always have their booms and bursts. That's natural. But actually, inability to appropriate value, inability to make something profitable, to find a profitable business model, stalls or stops progress in a lot of important sectors or industries about which we care about. For example, the renewable energies. RENIX World Index that I'm showing here is the index that has companies that are doing renewable energy. Tesla is part of that index and probably is the only success story in that index. So all other companies are companies that would produce in the United States solar panels, wind turbines, that would install them. They're companies that would try to develop new battery technologies and so on. So up until the year of 2008, the index was on the rise. At that time, everyone was happy. In 2008, we had global financial crisis, and investors started asking questions. And it happened that most of renewable energy business models were not sustainable. They were definitely creating a lot of value for stakeholders. We do need renewable energy. Whether it should substitute fossil fuels or complement them is another question and is beyond the scope of our lecture. But we definitely can agree that we need renewable energies, but they have to be done in a viable manner. Those business models have to be profitable without government subsidies. Otherwise, we will always see the collapse, as we see this collapse after the year of 2008. So when everything was going fine, when the government was supporting and customers didn't care that much about their spending, renewable energy stocks were on the rise. Once credit crunch came, everything collapsed and they actually never bounced back. Probably Tesla is the only success story which is part of that index. So we do need to understand business models. We do need to understand how to build a viable enterprise around an innovation. Renewable energy story is a point here, is a clear point here. We do need this innovation, but it has to be done in such a way that a business model can break even without government support. This gets me to the business model value matrix. This was a matrix published by me and my co-authors in 2016 in Strategy and Leadership Journal, where we bring attention of business leaders to two dimensions of quality of a business model. One is how much business value is created. Business value is all about, is it profitable or not. Low business value means that either you have negative profit, negative financial result, or it means that you are not, you're lagging behind the industry average. High business value means that you are exceeding industry average. The other axis is customer value. It means, do you have happy customers? Are you generating sufficient value, above average value for your customers? Are you high customer value means that you are best in the world for your customers. Low customer value means that, well, competitors are offering something that is objectively or subjectively in the customer's eyes better. And juxtaposing these two dimensions gives us that typical 2x2 matrix that was not discussed before. But I believe it actually allows us to have meaningful discussions about effectiveness and efficiency of a business model. So, business models. Let's imagine that we have a startup. Initially, our startup is not profitable, but we have unique innovative technology that solves customers' problems best in the world. In this case, our startup gets into the giver quadrant. Giver quadrant means you have lots of happy customers, but you are not profitable. By the way, all the social enterprises and non-profits are usually, by design, they never leave this giver quadrant. So they need constant inflow of cash because they have low business value or actually negative financial result. Now, one of the hardest thing for any startup is to move from giver to winner, is to start charging sufficient prices and have enough customers who stay with your startup once you start charging a fair price. The valley of death in Silicon Valley is moving from giver to winner. It's very easy to start a giver business model. Well, you can open a restaurant that gives away food for free. You will have lots of people, you will have lots of happy customers, but you will destroy business value essentially. So, but once your restaurant starts charging reasonable prices in order to become profitable, you might lose all those customers who came for free meals. So the trick is how to move from giver to winner. Winner state is when you have both happy customers and happy shareholders. Winner is the state where most companies try to be. Unfortunately, with time, because of the competition, usually either you will move back to giver quadrant. So, for example, the new competitors will come and will drive all the prices in the industry down. And unless you have a bulletproof competitive advantage, you will have to move your prices down and you will go back to giver quadrant. But even much more typical is the transition from winners to takers, is the transition from having happy customers and a lot of profit to just having a lot of profit. Usually it happens because customer value with time gets eroded. Because with time a company becomes complacent and new, more innovative competitors will show up and will offer to customers something much better than what you have. Of course, because of inertia, because of loyalty of customers, because of high corporate reputation, because of dominating the sales channels, because of the government support, you might remain in taker quadrant for some time. You might have unhappy customers, but still be extremely profitable. For that matter, all the natural monopolies are usually somewhere here. So, if you're unhappy about, I don't know, your gas supplier or your electricity supplier, you might try to call them, and it is not uncommon for you to wait a long time in order to get to solve your problem, because ultimately they might not care that much about high customer value. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the society, taker quadrant is very unsustainable. Without government support, for example, and government protection, takers usually move to losers. And losers means you're not profitable and you don't have any customers. We all have examples of these loser companies, of fallen giants of the industries. Nokia, that once dominated smartphone industry, is right now a shadow of its former self. It is arguably in this quadrant. BlackBerry is arguably in this quadrant right now. Can they reinvent itself? Statistically speaking, most likely no. there are not so many cases of companies successfully moving out of loser quadrant. But ultimately, this is a natural evolution. All the companies, or most companies, go through a typical cycle. They start at givers. If they can build competitive advantage and make sure that they charge proper price, they will move to winner quadrant. After winners, they will move to taker, and there might be some oscillation between taker and winner. So, for example, a company like Apple, it might move between winner and taker for some time. But sooner or later, companies end up in losers quadrant. The average life cycle of the company, it depends on the industry, it depends on time, but we can talk about 30 to 50 years for the full cycle of the company to start to go giver, winner, taker, and loser. Of course, it is not granted. Some companies can move between takers and winners and givers for some time, like IBM. They were reinventing themselves again and again and again, and they remained relevant. Or Microsoft. Arguably, Microsoft moved from winner to taker, then they were able to reinvent themselves, move back to winner, and they remain somewhere between those quadrants. Okay, so this chart basically shows a typical company's evolution, and one of the things that I'm studying quite carefully is what is the corporate longevity? How long does it take a company to move between the quadrants? And so far, what I can say, most of the literature, most of the empirical evidence shows that these days, companies are moving between the quadrants way faster than before. If an average company would expect to remain in business, to remain relevant in 1950s for about 60 years, now this cycle collapsed to 25-30 years. However, for startups, usually most new ventures should not worry that much about this winner to taker to loser oscillation. What they should really care about is how to escape the giver trap, how to move from giver to winner stage, and then how to remain winner. This is what should worry us in entrepreneurial thinking. Later, when we talk about larger organizations, we can also talk about how takers can reinvent themselves, of course, through innovation, to create an outstanding customer value. But for most entrepreneurial thinking projects, it is all about showing that within 3 to 5 years, you can escape the giver trap. You can actually become profitable. Now let's add a little bit more formality here. Let's talk about what drives customer value and business value. And this model, even though it looks a little bit mathematical, but actually it is quite intuitive. So what is the value that is created by the business model? So in a market economy, the value is created if the customer's willingness to pay, this is customer's willingness to pay, is exceeding the price that the customers are creating, that the customers are paying. So this leads to customer value capture. In economics, this is called consumer surplus. Willingness to pay is the subjective assessment, how much the customer assesses the utility, assesses the use of your product or service. This is willingness to pay, and this is the price, how much they are actually paying. As long as their willingness to pay is higher than the price, customers are happy. You have happy customers, we are talking about customer value. Now, the other part of total value created is the business value. Business value is essentially profit. It is the difference between customer prices that you are charging and input costs that you are incurring for serving your customers. So as long as price is higher than the cost, which is your profit, you're creating business value. So total value created by a business model is the difference between willingness to pay and input costs. And then the customer price determines how this total value created is distributed between customers and the company. Of course, I drew here an ideal picture, a winner situation, when the customer value is positive and business value is positive. But if, for example, our costs are higher than the price that we are charging, it means that we have huge positive customer value. The customer is paying less than our costs, but we are destroying business value. This is the giver's business model. On the other hand, if, for example, we are a government protected organization and everybody has to buy from us at any price that we charge, well, if you went through, for example, immigration experience, you had to pay for immigration to Canada or to United States or to Australia or to any other country, whatever their government charges wants you to charge. And maybe your willingness to pay was much lower than what you had to pay, but since you really needed to immigrate, in this case you would feel that you are destroying your value, but ultimately you would still do it. So sometimes the price can exceed willingness to pay. In this case, you will have a lot of business value. The difference between costs and price, it will be just huge. But simultaneously, willingness to pay of customers will be lower than the price. It means that customers are getting screwed up. This is the taker quadrant. Okay, so we discussed that three essential things that talk about customer value and business value, or total value of the business model. It is all about willingness to pay. It is all about costs. The difference between willingness to pay and costs, total costs for your company, means that some value is created in the economy by your company, and then the price determines actually how this value is spread between your company and the customers. So essentially these mechanisms explain us how these giver, winner, taker and loser quadrants are formed. Now, what can you do? What are the main mechanisms for increasing the value created by the business model? And those mechanisms are four. We have an article, 2018 article, with a little bit of academic flavor, but ultimately this article talks about four essential mechanisms through which value is created. First, value proposition. It is all about what you are offering and what kind of problem do you offer to solve to your customers and how you are better than everyone else. This affects positively customer willingness to pay. The more specific your offering is to a customer, the more it addresses the customer's important needs, the better it is from competitors, the more is the customer's willingness to pay. Second thing is value targeting. It is about, did you select your primary customer well? You might have a perfect business model, but perfect value proposition, but for a wrong customer. In this case, they will simply not care. So, for example, there is a lot of use in education for smart boards. It is boards on which you can write, and this board is connected to computer, and then so you can have a lot of interactions. Your students can actually interact with slides or interact with different programs using the whiteboard, which is smart board. So it has great value proposition. But for example, as a university professor in my current lectures, particularly in online format, there is not so much use for me in smart board technology. It is definitely useful for other professors in other contexts, but not for me when I record this lecture. So value proposition is great, but if you value targeting, if you try to sell me a smart board, probably I should not be your primary customer. Find somebody, do the proper value targeting, find the customer for which this board will be very, very important, solving their problems. Then we talk about value delivery and value appropriation. Value delivery is all about how costly it is to deliver on your promises. So how effective you are in delivering on your promises. And it determines the price that you are charging, and it determines the costs. And simultaneously, value appropriation is all about, can you set the price right? Do you have the proper business competitive advantage in your business model that allows you to charge customers more than your costs? So, four essential mechanisms of business model: value proposition, targeting, delivery, and appropriation. So from more general level discussion, these are four levers that allow you to determine how much value you're creating. Now, let's get to very practical details. Let's talk about how to design a business model, how to analyze a business model. And this is where there are a lot of different frameworks, competing frameworks flowing in the market. there is really great business model canvas with 9 building blocks. There is Lean Canvas, which is a little bit different. There is Harvard's approach to how to show a business model. So there are different frameworks for showing, for analyzing, for designing a business model. All of them have their pluses and minuses. My task is actually to give you a general understanding of how to think about a business model. And then you can use this framework that I'm offering, or you can use any other framework. This approach is a sophisticated way of thinking about a business model. If you master it, then you can actually use any other tool that might be required, for example, by your banker or by your stakeholders. So, when we think about a business model, when we think about commercial manifestation of your idea, we have to think about 4 things. First is target industry. Whom are we targeting? Second is about stakeholders and value propositions. What do we offer to our stakeholders to get them on board? Third is design of activity system. What are the key activities and processes that we have to establish in our business model for its operation? And finally, what kind of resources do we need for our business model to operate? Which resources do we have to acquire or to gain control or to borrow or to lease in order for our business model to operate? So, once you have discussed these 4 quadrants, you have the full business model. They cover all the things that are covered in business model canvas, for example, which is a little bit more simplistic. I believe that this framework has much more substance in it. So, when we analyze business model, we analyze target industry, or when we design business model, we talk about target industry, value proposition, design of activity system, and resources. Let's go through each of those quadrants one by one. First, target industry. In a different lecture, we already discussed how to select an industry, how to analyze an industry. So here I will not repeat the material about industry scorecard and selecting the proper niche. I will only talk about, so what should you explicitly discuss when you talk about target industry of your enterprise? First, broad industry definition. So what industry are you in? Is it software development? Is it education? Is it manufacturing? Second, what is addressable market? How large is the market of people, of your primary customers, of people who have this problem that you're solving? Third, you have to discuss initial segment or initial niche. Where are you going to start? What exactly is going to be the niche or segment that you are planning to dominate initially? And finally, what are the planned expansion segments? If within the 5-year framework for which you will be developing financial projections, you are planning to move from your initial niche or segment to others, this is where you list them. So, again, target industry, it is all about what industry are you in, how many customers do you have, addressable market, potentially even how much money in dollar terms can this market generate, initial segment or niche, planned expansion segments. Now we move to second quadrant. Second quadrant is value propositions. It is where you list key stakeholders. Who are the key partners? Who are the key organizations or individuals or group of individuals whom you need to get on board for your business model to see the light of the day? So, list of stakeholders and what exactly do you offer to each of them? Crucial organization stakeholders, they are different for each entrepreneurial project. But in my experience, I have not seen yet a single entrepreneurial idea that would rely on one group of stakeholders only, for example, on customers only. In most cases, you need more. You need partners. You need some crucial employees that you cannot easily get on the labor market, and you have to consider them key stakeholders and formulate value proposition to them. It can be government, it can be investors, if you need special type of investors, it can be communities where you're going to operate. So, for example, if we want to, if our entrepreneurial idea is about chocolate candies, we want to produce chocolate candies and sell them through corner stores. Our first stakeholder is going to be end users, so whoever is going to eat our candies, but we also have to think about buyers. If, for example, our candies are targeting kids, the buyers are going to be kids' parents. So you have to make sure that kids love you, but also that parents feel okay about buying your candies to their kids. Also, you have to talk about sales channel partners who are going to put your candies on the stores, on their shelves. So, here we are talking about three crucial stakeholders. Maybe if you need some unique components, unique supplies for your candies, you will need to add crucial suppliers there. If we are talking about a venture that relates to early stage drug development, for example, we have an idea about some vaccine that will treat coronavirus. We definitely have to think about end users, consumers, how much they can pay, what exactly we are offering and how we are better from everyone else. But also buyers, insurance companies, for example, also sales channel partners, because our vaccine or our drug against coronavirus has to somehow get to end users. But we also have to think about government and all the approvals that we have to go through. We also have to think about special type of investors who are patient investors who can give us millions of dollars for drug trials, expecting to get results only 7 years down the road. So, in this quadrant, value propositions, we talk about crucial stakeholders and value propositions to each. Later we will validate it. We will actually talk to these people, or we will observe, we will validate whether what we are offering to them makes sense. If you miss a crucial stakeholder, that stakeholder might block your whole business model from emergence, and your whole innovation will not see the light of the day. This is where I strongly recommend to fill in this table. Formalize stakeholder analysis and formalize value proposition for them. Right now I'm organizing a major conference related to corporate longevity, and I literally fill in this table. I practice what I preach. I talk to stakeholders, diverse stakeholders of my conference, and everyone whom I need to get on board for my conference to see the light of the day. I fill in this table not to forget. I fill in this table in order to later be able to validate my business model with those stakeholders. So the problem, the table is, first you list all the stakeholders. As you remember, you usually, it is usually 5 to 7 key stakeholders. Then you discuss your value proposition. What is the problem that you are solving to them? A hint about your solution and a hint about how you are different. For your primary customers, this has to be very specific, almost like a full value proposition here. But for other stakeholders, you might just have general ideas about how to create value for them. So if, for example, you are producing an electronic device that you are going to sell through Walmart, you have to discuss your primary customer, who is going to be, for example, the buyer and end user, and you have to discuss what exactly is the problem you're solving and how you're different, what is good about your solution. But then your second crucial stakeholder will be Walmart, but probably you don't have to generate best in the world value for Walmart. Just find out what are the standard terms and conditions of Walmart working with their suppliers, and just become that supplier. Also, if you need a graphical way to show how you are different from everyone else, you can use Value Canvas that I discussed in prior lectures. Value Canvas is a graphical way to show what are the key value dimensions of your proposition and how you rank against competitors on those value dimensions. This is usually needed, for example, in investor pitches, when you have to clearly show how you are different, how your new thing is different from substitutes and competitors. And the final thing, solve a problem. Ultimately, if your business model revolves around solving a problem rather than satisfying a passion or something that is good to have, you are much more likely to succeed. Solve a problem to all your stakeholders. Now, quadrant number 3, design of activity system. Design of activity systems as all the details, all the processes and technologies that you have to establish and activities that you have to establish within your organization as part of your business model. Key parts of this activity system is revenue models, which is about how exactly you are going to charge your customers, what will be your price, and so on. Second is R&D model, how exactly you are going to develop your product or service. If the development part is not that big, so for example, if you are starting a plumbing business, then you don't need to talk about R&D model, because probably you will not do too much R&D. Although if you're thinking about some multi-sided platform that links together plumbers and customers, then development of that platform and improvement is R&D model. Third is production model. What are day-to-day activities that will happen in your company? Manufacturing, logistics, service. Fourth is go-to-market model. It is all about answering the question, how exactly you're going to reach your customers. And this is where a lot of ventures started, for example, by engineers. They fail. They have a feeling that you build this technology and people will come. In practice, people don't come. You describe your technology on your website, but without getting somehow traffic on your website, people don't come. So go-to-market model is an answer to a question, how exactly you're going to reach your customers. That's 4 key parts of the third quadrant of design of activity system. Let's go through each of them. Revenue model. When talking about revenue model, we talk about all the revenue streams that we are going to use. You can fill in this table if you expect to have a lot of revenue streams and you need to systematize them. But if you are thinking about 1 or 2 revenue streams, you can just usually describe this. So, revenue stream type can be asset sale, means that you're selling the thing and you're getting money for it. Usage fee means that the more customers are using your services, the more they have to pay. It is like you pay a lawyer, for example, hourly basis. Subscription fee means that you pay regularly once a month or once a week or once a year, and then you use as much services as you want. Lending and leasing is all about, it is a substitute for asset sale. Instead of just selling, I lend it to you. Licensing means that you usually don't want to manufacture something yourself and get it to the market. Instead, you partner with established company to manufacture and to market the stuff for you. You just get your royalty or licensing fee. Brokerage fee is another type of revenue. It is all about when you facilitate the transactions between, for example, buyers and sellers, you get your brokerage cut. Finally, advertising means that customers get something for free from you, but they pay with their attention that you monetize through ads. So these are essential types of revenues. One can think about additional ones, but this will cover 99% of different types of revenues that a company can charge. Frequency is frequency and pricing. You will need this information when generating financial projections. So how often a customer, an average customer, would pay you and how much you will charge them. Do you have differentiated prices? Do you have good, better, best offering or not? All of this goes towards this pricing strategy. Particularly if you expect to have a couple of revenue streams. If you're developing, for example, a revenue model for a business school, there are lots of different revenue streams a business school is generating. And usually it makes sense to actually fill in this table if you want to develop any type of budget or financial projections. R&D model. R&D model is all about how you're going to develop your product or service if there is going to be some development. And the key question here is, should you develop it yourself or should you buy it from somebody else? If you are starting a company that is expecting to sell software or to have some sort of multi-sided platform that links together drivers and riders, the question is, should you develop this complex project yourself or should you outsource it? And the answer here is not whether you have the necessary competence or not. If the competence is not there, just get it. Get a chief technology officer that will have the necessary competence. The key question here is the following. Is a particular technological part going to be your competitive advantage, going to underpin your competitive advantage? everything that is going to be part of your competitive advantage has to be done internally so that you have full control over that source of competitive advantage. On the other hand, all the technologies that are not part of your competitive advantage can be outsourced. For example, a business school. A business school needs to have a website. Should you have internal website developer or should you get somebody else? Well, is your website going to be a source of your competitive advantage? Most likely no. In this case, feel free to outsource it. Let somebody do it for you. However, if your website has some sophisticated technological solutions that are going to underpin your business school's competitive advantage, then you will actually have to do it internally. So, when designing a business model, this is crucial for understanding your startup costs. You have to list all essential research and development projects, what kind of expected outcomes you have. So, for example, development of website, development of back office, development of front sort of application that customers will see, expected outcomes. Is it essential for strategic advantage or not? Everything that is not, feel free to outsource. Don't spend time on it, let somebody else do it for you. Everything that is crucial for your competitive advantage has to be kept internally. Otherwise, your company becomes a hostage to somebody else. Your competitive advantage belongs to somebody else. And it is not that that other company might try to take advantage of you and imitate you. This happens, but not too often. Much more often what happens is that third-party developer might reprioritize. They might get some major order, and at the time when you need a major bug fixed in your product, they might be devoting their time to something else, or they might close altogether, and in this case, all your competitive advantage will be closed with that third-party developer. Also in R&D model, we can talk about IP protection, and IP protection is a long topic that deserves separate investigation. Sometimes patent works. In most cases they don't work, but they still signal your quality. So this is a long discussion that goes beyond our lecture. But what I would like to say that it is a placeholder. This is where you're going to discuss ways to protect your intellectual property through patents, trademark, trade secrets, industrial design, copyright, and so on. In R&D model, that's where you discuss it. So if your investors ask you, are you going to file for a patent? You have to think about it in advance. Production model. So production model are everyday activities that will happen in your organization. Manufacturing, logistics, supply chain management. The same with R&D model. The question is here, should it be performed internally or should it be outsourced? Should you do manufacturing yourself or let somebody else do manufacturing for you? Should you do customer service yourself or let somebody else do it for you? And the answer here is the same as with R&D. If a particular process is going to be a source of competitive advantage, it has to be done internally. You cannot rely on somebody else to do it for you. If, on the other hand, the particular process is not part of your competitive advantage, outsource it. So, for example, if accounting is unlikely to be a source of competitive advantage, let some other company do accounting for you. Don't spend time on it. On the other hand, if, for example, customer service is going to be a source of competitive advantage, if you are a large bank that tries to build competitive advantage on closeness to customers, it might be a better idea to outsource your contact center to a third party overseas. It might be a better idea to actually pay extra for it, but have it internally. So production model, this table basically outlines the most important processes that you will have to establish, how costly they are going to be, and finally the decision about are you going to do them internally or outsource. Sometimes you will need to outsource them, but still develop a plan to insource to do them internally, if they are going to underpin your competitive advantage. Finally, go-to-market model. Go-to-market model is precise answer to the question how exactly you're going to reach your customers and how costly it is for you. So here you have to think about what are channels to reach customers. Are you going to use Salesforce? So Are you going to have salespeople who are developing your business, going door to door, or are you going to rely on somebody else? If you expect to sell through web, how exactly are you going to generate traffic? How exactly you are going to generate customers on your website? Will you buy ads on Facebook? Will you buy ads on Instagram, Google, whatever? Third, if you're talking about stores, are you going to work through stores, your own or external stores? Maybe you can work with distributors, wholesalers. There are different ways, and usually you might have a multi-channel strategy. But go-to-market strategy is all about how you're going to reach your customers. And also, you have to know how expensive it is. This is what economics of customer acquisition is all about. For each revenue stream, for each channel, you have to understand what is customer lifetime value. So how much value is a customer going to generate for you over the whole lifetime of your relationship with this customer. If you are just selling something physical to a customer will come, pay for it, and will never come back. If you are selling some services and customers are going to work with you for 5 years, how much revenue is a customer going to generate for you? This is customer lifetime value. Important, it is revenue, not profit. Because, well, I will discuss technical issues why, but customer lifetime value has to be measured in revenue per customer over the average life cycle of the relationship with a customer. Now, cost of customer acquisition. Cost of customer acquisition is all about how expensive it is for you to reach a customer. So, what is the commission that you are paying? Or, for example, out of $1,000 that you invest in Facebook targeted ad, you are getting 100 customers. In this case, cost of customer acquisition is $10 per customer. Or, for example, you are relying on Salesforce, on your own Salesforce. So each salesperson generates for you 10 customers a month, and you are paying this salesperson $10,000. So it means that cost of customer acquisition for you is $1,000. And finally, CLV over CCA rule means that sooner or later, customer lifetime value, revenue-based, has to exceed cost of customer acquisition. Of course, initially you have to educate your customers, you have to invest a lot in marketing, so your initial cost of customer acquisition might exceed customer lifetime value. But with time, cost of customer acquisition should go down as you are better and better at targeted ads, as you don't need to invest a lot of money in explanation to customers what kind of problem you solve to them. So at one moment, cost of customer acquisition should go below the customer lifetime value. Otherwise, your economics of customer acquisition simply does not work. Of course, you can ask a question. So CLV, customer lifetime value, is revenue based. We also have cost of serving the customer, so maybe we are still losing the money. And this will be correct. But economics of customer acquisition is just about, does revenue per customer exceed cost of customer acquisition? Profit per customer is something else, because ultimately cost of customer acquisition is part of profit, so it's hard to disentangle them. Instead, it's better to rely on revenue. What is the revenue, customer lifetime value in terms of revenue, and what is the cost of customer acquisition? Finally, resources for the business model. What kind of things do you need to develop or acquire in order for your business model to start operating? This will determine the essential part of your startup costs. So here we talk about investment capital, how much money do you need, human capital, what kind of employees do you need, if you need some specific type of employees, so some very rare type of engineers or scientists, you have to develop a precise plan about how to get them. What kind of partnerships do you have to establish with your, for example, suppliers or with your sales channels? What tangible and intangible assets you need, physical IT systems, software, hardware, do you need, manufacturing facility? Finally, what are the capabilities? What kind of things that you need to learn for your business model to start operating? And it is prudent to fill in this table. Later on, this table will become very, very instrumental when explaining to potential investors why you are asking them for $10 million. Well, because here are the things that we need in order to start. And this is how expensive and how much time it will take us to start. By the way, this resource part of the business model also determines the startup time, not just startup cost. And finally, here are our plans for development, acquisition, and sustaining of those resources. So, going back to business models. In order to analyze business model, in order to design business model, you have to think about 4 essential dimensions: industry, stakeholders' value propositions, design of activity systems, and resources. Once you have thought through these 4 dimensions, you have a well thought through business model. You covered all essential commercial aspects of your enterprise. If you ever need to fill after that business model canvas, you will have all the information for business model canvas here. This is a thinking tool. This is a thinking tool that makes sure that you don't forget essential part of a business model. And this essentially gets me to the end of our lecture.